everyone, thank you so much for tuning into this video. It's based on one of a series of events that we have held as academics from Strathclyde University working in the business school with GCVS. This session is on working with universities, and over the next 15 minutes or so we're going to explore how the community organisations and third sector groups that you represent can effectively engage with us as academics and hopefully increase your research capacity through understanding. And I'm Jen Remnant. I'm a senior lecturer within the business school, and I'm working with my colleagues Kawia, Darren and Manish on this project. In this video, we'll be talking about general collaboration with researchers based on the content of an event we hosted in May 2025. So whether you're new to academic partnerships or whether you already have some experience, hopefully there's some helpful information in these videos just to further aid you in developing those relationships. Okay, so for an overview today, we're going to quickly run through working with university researchers, so what university funding looks like, what funders and funding means in a university context, what the timelines for that are, and what our priorities are. And then possibly most importantly, we're going to talk about the barriers to meaningful engagement between third sector partners and academics and what the opportunities are represented in those partnerships. So first we'll start with who is a researcher in the university or in a university. It's important to start at the top with we want to hear from you. So researchers want to hear from potential partners in any capacity. So please don't ever feel intimidated about finding us. And an easy way to find us is literally to Google the university that's nearest to you or the university that you want to work with, and then just some keywords. So if you work in mental health and you want to find a researcher who works on that, write in researcher, mental health, Strathclyde. And then have a look at what the research interests are. Our emails are all attached to our profiles and we desperately want you to get in touch. The only thing I can't promise is that we will email back immediately, but I'm sure you understand what that's like. In terms of job types and what that means for capacity and joint research, I'm just going to run through some of the job titles that we have here and what it means in terms of research capacity. So we have our professors and our readers. So these are the more senior researchers in a university, and they do tend to be research active unless they're a professor of practice or a professor of teaching or a KE professor. So it's worth looking out for KE or teaching written next to those job titles. These people have a larger funding income usually. They're also usually in management responsibilities, so have quite a few responsibilities and commitments throughout the university. So it's worth being aware that you might experience a delay in engagement, but it is those people that are likely to be leading on large grants. And we'll talk about what I mean by large grants in a minute. A step down from that in the university hierarchy, because universities are still very hierarchical, is a senior lecturer or a lecturer. So I'm a senior lecturer. This means I'm fairly research intensive and I have some teaching responsibilities, but that I don't have as many managerial responsibilities. So this is a really good target audience if you want to get in touch with someone who's likely to have some capacity and will respond to your email and is ready to work with you and ready to write those large applications. Often working for senior lecturers, professors or readers are postdoctoral researchers or postdoctoral fellows. The difference between those two are both of them are postdoctoral, so both of them have completed a PhD level study, but a postdoctoral researcher or postdoctoral research associate or assistant is working on someone else's project, so someone else is leading a project and they are staff on it, and a postdoctoral research fellow is leading their own project, but they are the only worker on it, so that it's an independent study. Again, they often have capacity to work with you. It's just worth remembering that they might be working for someone else and they might not have their own delegated time to work with you on that. Teaching assistants and associates and knowledge exchange and associates work on different things, and their focus tends to be on engagement through activities that are outward looking and dissemination, or on providing curricula to students. If you think you can engage with someone on those kind of things, please don't hold back from getting in touch with KE and teaching staff. But it's worth remembering that if it's your research capacity that you're seeking to develop, it's professors, readers, lecturers, senior lecturers and postdoctoral researchers that you'll want to be getting in touch with. So now we'll move on to different roles within research. We use acronyms PIs, co-Is, and then often RAs or KEAs. And those are expanded here. So a principal investigator is the person who is accountable for the research and managing the research. Sometimes they're not doing the research. Sometimes they are the manager, exclusively the project manager. Co-investigators help manage, sometimes do some of the work, sometimes manage particular work packages within a large body of work. And research associates or research assistants and or knowledge exchange assistants or associates contribute to the actual collection of data and or dissemination activities. So principal investigator, the buck stops with them, they're liable for the project. Co-investigators help manage and research associates actually do the work, essentially. there are obvious changes and there's flexibility within that. So within that, roles for external collaborators, including yourselves, would be co-investigators, so supporting the management of a project partner or collaborator, and that tends to mean informing the direction of the research or helping shape it through project advisory meetings and making sure that it's meeting the need of the end user. Project advisor, offering ad hoc guidance. Advisory panel member, very similar to the previous two roles, but a little bit more light touch. Reviewer, it might just be that you read the application, double check it's meeting the needs of your service users. Seconded or peer researcher, you might want to have someone from your organisation embedded in the team, or you might want the team to be embedded in your organisation. A gatekeeper simply means someone who we have to pass through to access something. So you might be the gatekeeper to participants, like we might be looking for people who use mental health services. You might have a lot of service users who engage in those services, and you might enable us to send our invitations to them. Again, that's quite light touch. The last option, which I think is one of the most exciting, is a third supervisor for PhD students. So PhD students do excellent research because they have 3 years of uninterrupted study focusing on one topic. And if we can embed them with an organisation and meet their research capacity, it's kind of a really meaningful, high quality project that you'll end up with because it's dedicated research time. So really worth considering that one. And that would be alongside 2 academic supervisors. So in terms of university funding, the amounts can change drastically. So external funders, this can be anything from hundreds of pounds to run a short event or to make a video, right through to millions of pounds to build an entire new laboratory or to organise a new research centre or conduct international research. Internal funding tends to be less than 30 grand. But tends to be less competitive and arrives in the bank account much faster and can be used at a much higher level, at a much speedier level. We'll talk about the timings in a second. So in terms of these funding cycles, they can be quite slow. There's often a call for funding, so a call to apply for funding early in the year, so March or April in the kind of springtime, and that comes through the following autumn, and or there are applications that go in the autumn and they get released the following spring. Realistically, they tend to last a lot longer than that, and it can take up to 2 years from application or organising an application through to actually accessing the cash if you're successful in the competitive market. Internal grants, much faster. Like I say, they're often what we call open calls, which means they're always available to apply for, and there is a very quick turnaround, usually with a requirement that it's spent within the next financial year. PhD scholarships, we apply for them in the winter, we find out if they're successful in the summer or the spring, and then we start them the following autumn. So we apply in November, December, we find out if the student's successful in March, and we start the following October. In terms of funding types, this isn't an exhaustive list, but it's just some words you might see when you start engaging with academics. Collaborative and partnership grants, exactly what they say on the tin, opportunities to start working together. A bit like this whole project is funded from a collaborative grant, where it's an attempt to try and foster more working relationships. Networking grants, very similar, but it tends to pay for the space that everyone comes into to create a network. Knowledge exchange grants tends to be where we create a space where we can exchange. Like you might expect, exchange knowledge, we learn from you, you learn from us. Travel and exchange funding, is there a researcher in Australia that knows a lot about a subject that we want to know a lot about them? Would it be worth bringing them over to teach us about it, as an example? Capacity building and impact accelerator can be a fuzzy mix of all the above. And then there's fellowships and PhDs. So fellowships are a single person working on a project, trying to find a specific thing out. And a PhD is very similar, but often at a higher level because it's so focused and the worker will have no other responsibilities other than the PhD. In terms of funding breakdown, and I'm going to try and skim through this because it's not interesting, but you might hear the language used when you start working with academics. We often say FEC, we're not swearing, we're saying full economic costing. So this is usually around 80% from a funder. But this means that they don't cover all the costs. So we have to think about how we put applications in. So if we put in an application and I decide to work with a member of GCVS and we get them funded and we put a costing in, my salary will be costed to the funder at 80%. And we need to make sure that the costs of the GCVS member are funded at 100%. So when people start talking about FEC, you need to say, we're costed at 100% to make sure that you don't get undercut. Some funders pay for overheads, so the additional costs of having an infrastructure, having rooms available, having space, IT, other staff, so administrative support. It's worth, again, noting if the academic you're working with is applying for something that covers those costs or not. And we divide them up as directly allocated and directly incurred. Directly allocated means we don't know exactly how much it's going to cost, so it's an estimate. So salaries, for example, which change over time, and directly incurred, where we do know exactly what it will cost because we have a quote, for example. Indirect costs, things we don't expect that come through, partner costs and costings, which is very likely what you would come under. And again, it's making sure that that's put at 100% FEC, and then travel and consumables, which is exactly what you might anticipate. Key funders that we might be applying for, UCRI, which is the taxpayers' funding. So that's government funding. It stands for UK Research and Innovation, and it covers all the research councils, which is the Medical Research Council, MRC, the Economic and Social Research Council, ESRC, Engineering and Physical Sciences, Arts and Humanities, Natural Environment, etc. So these grants are very, very competitive, but they're usually quite high amounts of money. There's high accountability because it's taxpayer money, but given that you're in the third sector and we're in the public sector, we know all about that level of accountability anyway. Other potential funders that we might be working with would be the British Academy, Wellcome Trust, Leverhulme Trust. These are all charities. They have specific criteria and changeable costing rules that we need to be aware of. You can also get money off private organisations. I'm a big fan of the idea of shy Ben's getting out. If we've got work that needs doing and we know that there's an organisation that makes philanthropic or payments towards research and we think they might fund it, there's no harm in getting in touch. This tends to be contract based and it's often more reciprocal, so I would anticipate offering them something beyond just developing their research capacity if they're paying for that. Lastly, internally in Strathclyde, there are other funding opportunities that are really worth looking at and are probably far more interesting to the GCVS audience. So we have innovation vouchers. So this is up to £5,000 to buy academic time so that we can develop your research capacity and get you thinking about research and how it might be useful for you. There's knowledge transfer partnerships. These are all over the shop with the amounts, but it's worth checking that out online. So that's ktpws.org.uk. We also have Impact Accelerator account funding, which usually is for academic secondments into an organisation for up to 3 months if you really want that embedded research capacity, but that ability to talk about research and develop those partnerships. There's also IAA funding for various other events and networking and travel grants that we could discuss if you wanted to get in touch with any of us. Lastly, we haven't used it yet, but there's also opportunities for funding to get for spin-outs and spin-ins via the University Innovation and Industry Engagement Team, which is if you have an idea that is in some way commercial and we could sell or we could work through a consultancy, we could possibly support with that as part of a partnership. In terms of funding priorities, when we're negotiating this working relationship, these are the things it might be worth remembering. In terms of academics, our requirements and goals are often informed by publications. We're regularly told publish or perish. We're expected to keep writing about what we do, and we'd hope that any research partnership would have an output of written work. So that might be that we co-write a report with you, and then we talk about turning that into an academic publication as well. We're also always looking for more funding. So every time we get a pot of money to do some work, we're looking at the opportunity to scale it up, do it again, replicate it in a different place, or just keep on building a relationship. And impact in the academy is probably measured slightly differently, perhaps to impact in the third sector, but we are required by our employer and by the funders to prove that we started off with a research question, we answered the question, and then we used that answer to do something useful in society. And that might or may not balance with your goals, which I assume, and this is my guesswork, so please do get in touch if there's anything else that I should have thought of, that I imagine there's end user / consumer benefit that's important to GCVS members, that sometimes income is important, that there might need to be a movement from money from one source into your organisation, and also impact. And again, maybe a different kind of impact, maybe the same kind of impact. And lastly, we need to look at what the funder is asking for. So in terms of developing our partnerships, we want to produce high quality research with important impacts in society. At the very beginning of the development of that relationship, we also want to prove to funders that that relationship exists. So we often ask for letters of support from organisations that we work with. We often ask for in-kind support, so perhaps we could work from your office space. We could have some support from staff time with development or recruitment of participants or dissemination of findings. And for some organisations, and admittedly not so much in the third sector, we might ask for financial support. And this isn't just to sort of have an extractive and unfair or exploitative partnership. It's because this evidences to the funders that what we're doing actually counts and is important. And we'll, in terms of Strathclyde, our strapline is the place of useful learning, and this evidences that usefulness. In terms of difficulties and barriers, timetables and scheduling. Universities run on their own separate timeline to every other institution in the world, it seems. And it can be very difficult because we have long periods of nothing happening, and then we suddenly find out about a funding call, and then we really want to apply very immediately. And there's 2 weeks of frantic emails, and can you do this? And can you write us a letter of support? And could you get in touch with us with this? And could you support us with this kind of recruitment? It requires an input of time and investment when there's no guarantee of funding. So we ask people to contribute toward applications. We don't know that we're going to get the money. So you might do that application support work for free, and none of us get what we want from it. And also logistics and capacity. Academic staff are at capacity. Colleagues in the third sector, we know that you're all at capacity too. However, loads of positive opportunities. Funding for everyone, which is always great. Improved research capacity. We can actually find stuff out together. Potential improved legitimacy of findings, that we're looking in the right place, we're asking the right questions, we've got access to the right people. Hopefully it would create new experiences and development opportunities for you. This can include co-authorship. I know that I've worked with some people that have been really excited to know that they're a published author now, even if it is in some obscure academic journal tucked away in a library. It means getting involved in research development and design, learning about that, increasing research literacy generally. And hopefully it's fun and interesting, though I appreciate this video might not have been the most fun 15 minutes of your life. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. There'll be more of this content available soon.